told if you keep your head down, work hard, and prove yourself, recognition, promotions, and opportunities will come. But let's be honest, that's just not true. This is Lead Without Limits, a podcast for professionals in multifamily and beyond who are ready to stop second-guessing themselves. Because leadership isn't just about titles or tactical skills. Yes, we'll cover those here, but real leadership starts from within. It's about changing the beliefs and behaviors that have kept you playing small and rewiring the thought patterns holding you back. I'm Shanenn Bryant, a confidence and pattern expert, and this is the space where we talk real growth, real change, and maybe have a little workday humor along the way. This episode is brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, delivering the latest news, ideas, and inspiration across the multifamily sector. If you're ready to lead without fear, lead without doubt, and lead without limits, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Lead Without Limits. I have with me Gabrielle Gonzalez. She is a tenured multifamily executive and respected business advisor who helps companies improve their performance through the implementation of a customer-centric operational strategy. She's a fellow podcast host with the Multifamily Media Network. Most importantly, though, she's a mom of boys and a fire carpool coordinator. That's hard to say. Carpool coordinator. Welcome, Gabrielle. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, see, that's the hardest part to say. It could possibly be the hardest part to do also, that carpooling, that carpool coordinator. Say it 3 times fast and try doing it 3 times fast in a day. I don't know. So yeah, happy to be here.
I am so happy for you to be here as well. We're going to talk about all things customer service, leadership. We're going to get into all of it. So happy that you're here. You know, one question that I wanted to just off the top of my head when I knew that you and I were talking, and I thought, what's like the number one thing that as someone who has to deliver service to the customer, so not necessarily the overall organization, but as someone who has to deliver great customer service, what's like the number one thing that I should know or need to be doing?
You know, that's a really good question and a really broad question. I feel like, gosh, I could go all over the place with that. And you got to be careful with me because I will and have gone all over the place. But I think one of the first things that's really important to remember in any type of service setting is that hospitality is a dignified thing to engage in, right? And so I think having empathy and displaying empathy and trying to think about what could I do for this person in this moment to make their to respond to their unasked questions, right? Like, what could I do to help them to maybe answer their questions before they even ask them, or handle their service before they even ask for it?
Right. So really kind of anticipating their needs. What are they going to ask? What do I think they're going to ask? Instead of being really focused on the task and thinking ahead a little bit. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's funny because it sort of extrapolates from like an old adage, which I think is really outdated and played out, which is the, do unto others as you would have them do to you, which, in theory is sort of nice and still, makes sense, but more appropriately in a hospitality setting or a service setting in general, we want to treat others the way that they would want to be treated. And so in order for us to do that, we have to sort of figure out what is that. And there's so many ways for us to do that, be it, data driven or survey or, asking or observing or, whatever business you're in. And in our industry in multifamily, obviously all of those resources are there for us to rely on, but figuring out, how can I treat these people the way they want to be treated?
Yeah, that's so good. Well, this podcast, yes, we talk about tactical leadership skills, but more importantly, I think it's like even deeper rooted than that is really the belief in ourselves. So all of these things, like I'm not going to deliver great customer service if I've got some beliefs about myself that I can't, that I don't know how, that, whatever those things are. So From that belief standpoint, what belief about themselves do you wish that every frontline employee would embrace to really elevate their customer service?
I think a fundamental belief about yourself is that I am worthy and I am capable, right? And I think having that, also projecting that same belief onto those with whom you interact.
Yeah.
So I'm worthy and I'm capable. So I'm worthy of this human interaction. And that's, and how, I think of it as like a synergy sort of, like I'm as a service provider, I'm delivering service to you, but hopefully that experience is such that it's elevating you. And now you're, that it's kind of reciprocal. It comes back to me. So I feel great that I've made you feel good, so it's really synergistic sort of belief and from a human perspective.
I think it's one of the things probably that comes up for most people. Am I good enough? Am I capable of doing this? And certainly I would think in this customer service environment where we are dealing with all types of people, all types of customers and their personalities, that's got to be really important, because if I'm going to let someone influence me or kind of take that away from me, like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough in this exchange, or I'm not capable of giving them good customer service, that certainly could inhibit or hinder that experience, right?
For sure. For sure. And, I think that that really hits on another really important piece, which is so often in customer service. And again, and I keep referring back to this, whether it's multifamily or really any hospitality or service industry, I think a lot of times people aren't necessarily trained to know how to provide that anticipatory service. They're not trained. They don't know how to do that. What signs to look for? What are those triggers that maybe your customer may be giving you if they're in person, or even if it's from a digital platform, what are those those click sites or questions that they're asking, engaging with your bots on, that would trigger you to take this or go down this step or this path instead of that one. And I think another one is that a lot of times people are not sufficiently trained on, that can also, diminish their confidence when they go into these things, is, maybe your product offerings, right? So if people are not sufficiently comfortable and confident in understanding what their product is, they're coming into that like service conversation or sales conversation, whichever it is, with already a sense of hesitation, like, gosh, what if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer to it? Oh no, and that really doesn't set people up for success at all.
Yeah, you brought up a really good thing, and I'd love to go a little bit deeper on it, because of course AI is out there. It's the big thing. And all of the digital experience that a customer has. And oftentimes before they've ever even spoken to someone, right, in person. Yeah. So you mentioned, like, how does this person know which direction to go, or how to serve that person based on maybe that interaction that they've done digitally. So are there any tips or tricks if I'm someone who has this customer that came in through, they've been chatting with the bot, or they've whatever that digital experience is first? What are things that I should be looking for that I can maybe kind of sink into or hook into when I do, as a human, take over that relationship?
I love it when we take over as a human.
As a human. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really important in that space is, or in any space, but as it relates to that specific aspect of the interaction, is making sure that you are aligning your execution with your customers' expectations. If and your customers' expectations are based sort of on how they've already engaged with your company. So if they've engaged with your company, for example, in a way where they've been asked certain data points and they've already keyed in, let's say, certain data points, which is like when they want to move, for example, and what their budget is. Okay. So when you engage with them as a human, I think it's really, really important to have yourself familiarized with those data points so that you don't go back and get into a redundancy sort of situation with them, which has them feel like your process is really disconnected. So you don't want to go in and say, so now, when are you wanting to move again? And then have them restate those things. And what is your budget? And, or maybe just begin speaking to them in a way that's contrary to the information that they've already provided. So I guess a much shorter, more concise way of answering that question might just be to
look at the info, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Familiarize yourself with the info before you engage with them.
I'm so glad that you talked. I'm like, nothing will get my blood pressure higher than to have to call like one of the cable companies. I'm not going to say which one or anywhere. Okay, I've given my name. I've given my zip code or my last four of my social, and then you go switch to something else, and then you have to give it again, and then even sometimes a third time. There's nothing more frustrating than that. Like, oh my gosh, I've already went through all of this information. What's the point of asking me if you're just going to ask me again?
Right.
It's so frustrating.
It's demonstrative of a completely disconnected customer experience. So like, or compartmentalized. So like maybe one part of your company is figuring out this AI stuff. The other part of your company is figuring out the phone people, and the other, it's just, so it makes you feel very disjointed and sort of thrown around as a customer. So, and it's discouraging and frustrating. So I think that's why it's like you said, it's so important to make that process seamless as you continue to go on. So continue to build on what that AI has done for you already and incorporate that information into your conversation and relationship building as you continue to move on.
What are your thoughts on, because this just made me think that if I am, if I'm the employee and I'm the one that's expected to give this service, maybe the bots and all of the digital stuff is set up by the marketing department at your company or whomever. I would think like if I want good customer service to anyone that comes in, would that not be part of my role too, is go, let me see what their digital experience is before they get to me. So testing it, seeing like, what does it do if I ask this question? What does it do if I request this information? And just to see what happens so that if there are any glitches, do you feel like that's that role? If you're a customer service agent or a representative, is that something that you should do or lean on whomever else?
Yeah. From an organizational perspective, I think it's something we should do. That's like the inspect what you expect, right? If I'm the marketing team and I'm putting this into play, then I should go on and go and check that and utilize my perspective to refine how that solution is working for us. But then also invite the perspective of those who are engaging with it routinely, right? And say, why don't you go through this experience from a customer's point of view and provide us any feedback for refinements or pivots that we need to make that would help us optimize, right, this solution so that the customer is seeing a real seamless and a real value. So this is adding value to that customer experience and also to you, to the employee as a customer, right? So that this is hopefully saving you time and getting you good information and helping to streamline your pipeline.
Yeah, it's like, what's the point of having all that or spend that extra expense? Because of course, now there's the extra expense of the bots that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
So if you're losing customers through that experience, we don't want to lose money twice, right? We're spending money on the bot and then we're losing the customer sale potentially if that is not a well-oiled machine.
So true. So true. And I think, you brought up the cable company, right? And I think it's but even in today's environment, think about how big some of these cable companies are, or banks, or, credit card companies. I mean, I think all of them, some of them I think have improved now that I think about it, but some of them have not. Or airlines, when they ask you for all of this information from an automated perspective, you put it all in, you got to go find it. It's really annoying and frustrating because you're already frustrated when you're calling in the first place, right? And then you do it. And the first time you get a human on the phone, they ask you for all that same freaking information all over again. And you're like, like if these companies that are supposed to be who we look to, the level in terms of professional sophistication,
right?
As an example, if they haven't gotten it right, what does that say about how people are focusing on the customer experience, or how, intentionally are we focused on that?
Yeah, so true. Because I want to switch gears to organizations as a whole, and you kind of were already starting to touch on it, but I have one other question. If I think of from the employee standpoint, if I made a mistake, so maybe I didn't look at the data, or maybe something went awry in that customer experience, in that customer interaction, what's the best way that I can bounce back from that? Can I still recover from that? And if so, what are things that I can do to kind of pull that customer back in? Sorry, but come back.
I think the fact is that happens a lot, right? It does happen a lot. And inevitably, we're going to make mistakes, however that happens. And I think that customers, and I think there's some data out there, and gosh, I wish I had it just off the top of my head, but I think there is data out there anyway that suggests that customers are, they don't mind vulnerability in an organization. So if you make a mistake, they typically, as long as this isn't, a compounded mistake where you keep mistaking over and over and over again, right, they will lose tolerance for that. But if you make a mistake or offend them, or, go into some kind of redundancy, they're open to that acknowledgement, that apology, and moving on from there. And I think even I would say that the best thing to do is fall on the sword, if you will, and just acknowledge, oops, you know what? I think maybe, whoops, we went the wrong direction there, or I went the wrong direction, or I misunderstood, or I overlooked some important data or part of our conversation that we'd already had, and I went the wrong way. I'm sorry about that. Can we get back? Can we start over? Can we get back to where we were right before that and move on? Because I really value this relationship, and I really value being able to provide you with a great experience.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you just made my stomach flip, because you sent me back to a time where I had just gotten my real estate license. I don't do it anymore, but this was years ago. And it was like my second deal that I was ever doing. And it was for my stepdad, which some might be like, oh, well, good. At least it was him. It was so much worse. Like, it was more nerve-wracking. And I made a $5,000 mistake, an agreement mistake, and had to be like, okay, so sorry, but it's going to cost you 5,000 more. And he's like, it's going to cost you 5,000 more. So, okay, I got it, right? But that's all I could think about when you were saying that. So,
my gosh, that's so funny. I bet that was so stressful for you. And people do always say that, right? Like, oh, it's your family. It's probably easier. It probably wasn't.
No. Yeah. So that, good lesson, but it was one of those where, like, sometimes that's just part of it. You just have to go in and go, hey, look, I'm sorry, I made this mistake. How do I fix this? How do I make it good?
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes, again, it is what it is. I hate that saying, but sometimes it really is. I could think of a time where I did that on a renewal, a long time ago. And I, put someone's washer and dryer in for free. And then I realized, oh no, and they'd already signed it. We'd already had the high five, you're redoing, and all is great. And I'm the new manager, and I'm really professional, and all this.
Yeah.
screwed it up. But I went back and, the right thing, I had to correct it. And I did, and manage the relationship. And I did. And I think, in those situations, people do appreciate the vulnerability. I think they appreciate the honesty and the integrity behind it as well.
Yeah. It definitely brings up the point of like being accountable for it and just like fessing up, owning up to it, making those changes, like address it as soon as you realize versus letting it go and go and go and go. Because even that 10 minutes between me realizing I'd made a $5,000 mistake and picking up the phone and saying it was torture. So get it over with sooner too, right?
Bless your heart. Yeah. Oh, and that's one that has stuck with you. But hey, look, here we are, and we can still talk about it today.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So speaking of making mistakes, I want to switch gears to now organizations as a whole, because certainly, we've got owners and supervisors listening to this podcast. And so what is one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make when it comes to CX?
I think one of the biggest mistakes they make is looking at the customer as the end user only.
What do you mean?
So often I think when we're in service industries in particular, we look at the customer as the end user. So like in our industry, it's the resident. We talk a lot about the resident and how do we treat the resident and all of that. And that is very, very important. So I don't mean to take anything away from that. However, the customer is really, I like to think of the customer as anyone who you interact with or engage with as a representative of your company. That could be your coworkers, employees, stakeholders, service providers, product providers. There's so any spectrum of people. And I think that a lot of times companies fail to recognize all of those internal and external customers as potential customers.
Yeah. Okay. So just being aware that it's not necessarily the ones that are just, paying the rent, but it could be others that are helping those people who are paying the rent, or that are also coming on property, or just anyone that you're interacting with on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, you think about like your landscapers on properties. Those people are coming on property, and those are people who are providing a service for you. So technically you're their customer, right? But also if you look at if you incorporate them into your definition of customer and think about it from a standpoint of like, how quickly are we getting them paid once they submit an invoice, right? And if we're getting them paid efficiently, and they're going to be happier and provide us probably with better service overall. If we're friendly to them and engage in conversation with them and find out about their day or their needs, or, work with them on scheduling how can we schedule our needs in to work, align with their needs efficiently. And think about those kind of things also. Or if it's a super hot day and they are out there for a long time and we go and bring them some Gatorades or something and just introduce ourselves on a human level, right? I think that those encounters as a representative, they reflect very well on your company. And they also reflect well and help to lift, right, the attitudes and feeling emotions of those people as well, which heightens everybody's sense of experience.
For those of you who may not pay your bills, people talk about it, right? I mean,
yes, they do.
Especially in the multifamily industry. People talk and they will say. So those vendors are really an extension of you as well, of your company as well. And sometimes I think we overlook that. So, it's not always considering what your residents or your prospects are saying about your community, but you bring up a good point about the vendors because they talk and they have access to a lot of other people, right?
For sure. And you think about too, like, if if they've got to pull teeth to get paid, or if we're rude to them every time we need something for them, or we're not really giving them any lead time for whatever we're asking for, when they think of us, our company in any way, they're getting like a nauseous feeling in their stomach, right? They're having kind of a bad feeling. And so when they execute that service, they're going to do it maybe not as friendly as they might have, or as enthusiastically, maybe not as intentionally, maybe not as effectively overall. And over time, that's how relationships deteriorate. And then when you have people in general in an organization, right, who are operating out of a sense of fear or doom and gloom, and because they have to, right? You're just not having an optimum workforce. You're not having the best case results,
and I think the employee is going to pick up on that too. I mean, that's going to make you a little bit nervous if you see that your company isn't paying your vendors or not paying them on time, or, whatever other shenanigans that maybe they're doing. You go, oh, is that going to be done to me? How are they going to treat me? So in this world where we know turnover is a big deal, even that still falls in this line of, customer service. In this case, your customers being your employees even.
Absolutely. It's funny. You just made me think of a little snippet I saw recently, just in the last couple of days, about a company, and I think I can say what company because it's out on YouTube, but the company is Chili's. They're a restaurant, Chili's.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's heard of Chili's. Well, I guess Chili's has had like one of the best growth years over the last 2 years, and especially in comparison to all of their competitors. And their CEO was talking, and I watched this video, and it was really, really interesting. He said basically they wanted to, look for ways to continue to grow, and one of their growth strategies. And the story was the CEO was there with all of their executive leadership, and they got 2 burgers out, and everybody tasted the burgers, and, they had to say, what's the difference, right, between this burger and that burger. And, some of the executive leadership team said, oh, I think the cheese is different on this one. And some said, oh, I think that's a different bun. And some said, no, I think you toasted the bun more on this one. And, because they're trying to find ways to improve little things. Well, it was none of those things. And what it really was the pickles. It was the pickles on the burgers. And this is one of these changes that they've made. So basically the chef said, see, you couldn't even tell the difference in the pickles. But the old pickle container that they had to get this like contraption, like weird thing, like special contraption to like get the lid off of it. It would pop off, and it was so like vacuum packed that then inevitably the pickle juice would spill all over the counter every time they got them out. And it was a real mess. And so that caused them, the people in the kitchen, right, more frustration of getting the pickle juice everywhere, and then another task of having to clean it all back up before, moving on. So they switched to a pickle that you just open the jar, you get the pickles out, super easy. And they're using those pickles instead. And so it makes the kitchen staff, right? It makes them feel a lot better because they don't have these 2 like extra like frustration points, right? And good news is those pickles are saving the money like $500,000 over the course of a year by going to this pickle from that pickle. And it's making the kitchen staff happier, and nobody could even tell the difference. So it's like, I just thought that was such an interesting story in customer experience, because again, looking at customer as a spectrum, right? Who is the customer, and how does helping the kitchen staff in that example really translate out to the end user customer?
Oh, yeah. So good. How interesting. They're all trying to figure out what the different thing is. Isn't there a book or a video or something? Just give them the pickle. Isn't there a customer service video? It's like so old, like 30 years old. I can't remember, but I think it's called Just Give Them the Pickle, because they had taken the pickle away. Look, if you're making my sandwich, don't you dare put that pickle on my sandwich. I get the pickle juice, even if they've put it on and I take it off, because my husband's always like, just take the pickle off. I'm like, the juice gets into the bun And then I taste the pickle. It's all I can taste. They do it on my grilled cheese, or they put the pickle next to your grilled cheese. Stop it.
So you don't like pickles?
No, I hate the taste of pickles, and the pickle juice gets all over my sandwich. It's the bun soaks it up. But
Shanenn,
in this case, give them the pickle.
You and my husband are exactly the same. I need to send you guys out for dinner. He does the same thing.
I get so frustrated. Like, stop it. I said no pickle. I don't want it on the side either. Oh my gosh. So good. Well, that does kind of lead to this last part about what are the tiny little things? Because sometimes we think, oh, customer service and maybe our scores are down, or, revenue is not as good. So what can we do to improve customer service? And I think you just told a beautiful story of sometimes it's not these big, grandiose things. It maybe is little things and in the details, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that so often details, I tell people details matter, right? They matter. And maybe not this one detail all by itself. It's maybe not, just because there's a cigarette butt stuck to a piece of gum, stuck to a piece of mulch in the corner, the curb line right in front of your clubhouse. Maybe that in and of itself is not the issue, right? But then when your prospect walks over that and then they come up to your clubhouse and there's fingerprints like all over the glass on the door, and there's kind of like dirty fingerprints all right around like where the handle is on the door, and they see that. Maybe it's not just that, but then they go into the clubhouse and it smells like onions from whoever just brought their lunch into the office instead of like
pickles.
or pickles.
smells
like pickles in the office, right? That. And then the person that's supposed to greet them is sitting behind their desk, maybe chewing at the moment, and is not ready to, greet them right away. All of these little things, these cumulative, it's the cumulative impact of various touch points over the course of a customer's interaction with your company. That's what is customer experience. And so that's why each of those little details needs to be attended to, because you never know how they are compounding with other little details that were not attended to.
That's such a good point, because they've maybe had the interaction with our bot, and then when they talk to us, we didn't remember their detail, but they still are giving us grace and coming in. And then our flags are all tattered at the entrance and don't look good. And then they see the cigarette butt, and then they see all of that stuff. I get what you're saying. It's all of those little details.
Yeah. And and the one little thing in and of itself is probably not going to be the deal breaker, realistically, but it's a compounded effort. And so, or not effort, a compounded impact. And so that's why I think it's so important. We recognize and identify from a company perspective all of those customer interaction touch points. And we think about how we can intentionally drive that customer experience up, exceed their expectations along the way.
Right. Okay. Final question, because I asked this of all my guests. So I do a power move of the week to give the listener a power move based on the topic we're talking about. So you can choose what's the power move that someone listening to this podcast can do when it comes to customer service. And you can either give the power move to I'm an employee myself, or maybe to an organization. So what should we do this week as our power move?
Oh, God. Make it relational. I think just make it relational. Let's get back to being humans interacting with humans, and being vulnerable and being intentional and being passionate about delivering excellent customer experience to whoever it is that you're engaging with as a representative of your company, whoever it is. So maybe the power move is with those external customers internal customers who are your service providers, your contractors, your vendors. Maybe you do something this week to go out and really blow their mind. And if it's hot out, maybe you go get your landscapers Gatorade or ice cream or, something like that.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
Gabrielle Gonzalez, I am so happy you joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. What a blast. And I'm so excited to see all of your great content coming up on the Multifamily Media Network.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for tuning in to Lead Without Limits and investing in what matters, you. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend or a colleague who might benefit as well. This podcast is brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, your trusted source for stories, trends, and insights in multifamily living. I hope this moved you one step closer to lead without fear, lead without doubt, and lead without limits.